Good Wednesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock in time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Just a week away, and the Browns rookies will report to Berea. A couple days later, it will be the veterans, and then next Saturday, everybody will be in West Virginia for the first official workouts of training camp. This is from the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, where the Browns roster ranks relative to all of the NFL for 2023.
Well, they're top 10 rosters, what I'm trying to say. But they are in a bunch of teams. There are 4 teams ranked 8th through 11th that are separated, and I wish I was kidding, by 0.07 points on their total roster value of all their players added up together. So it's a very tightly bunched group of teams, and it's AFC playoffs like the Ravens and Chargers are in that same bucket as well. But the Browns, when you think about the addition of Dalvin Tomlinson and you think about the addition of Zadarius Smith and you think about what we're expecting the addition of Elijah Moore is going to be for this football team. Well, for all of the discussion around DeShaun Watson and how much he can bounce back, dude, just keep it between the lines. Like this team really feels like it has put together one of the more talented rosters in the league. I was looking for another word other than talent because that felt like low-hanging fruit, but I couldn't find it. Obviously, they have one of the best offensive lines. You have Nick Chubb with a pathway for more playing time.
And with that, let's welcome in Cory Kinnan from BrownsWire.com. Cory, complete would be a good way, I think was the word he was looking for with the roster. But I agree with him. A lot of people are talking about DeShaun Watson having to be great. If he's great, they're Super Bowl contenders. He has enough talent. He just has to be above average, average to above average NFL quarterback, and they're a playoff team.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Again, their chips are in the middle of the table. You don't go out and bank on Zadarius Smith for 1 year if you don't think you're right there ready to win. You don't go out and spend as much money, make as many deals aggressively in the trade market as you do if you don't feel like you're ready to win. But again, we've talked about it a lot, I feel like, on the show, but it does come down to DeShaun Watson. So if he looks like DeShaun Watson from the last 6 weeks, you're probably not winning more than 7-8 games. But if he looks like DeShaun Watson from Houston, you're Super Bowl contenders. And again, I thought Kyle, we follow each other, as a colleague of mine, hit it pretty well when he was talking about the margin of error between 7 or 8 teams, all under like 1 point on their roster construction. But that's really what it comes down to. If you can get to the playoffs, you can compete with any team. It's a lottery ticket. So you get that lottery ticket, you're in the playoffs. Anything can happen from there. So they at least need to get a lottery ticket this year. Yeah, I agree with you. And the margin for errors, it's going to be small. It's going to come down to really small things that determine the 5th or 6th team in the conference from the 9th or 10th team that's looking into the playoffs. Along those lines, this is from CBS Sports. Overvalued players on each AFC team. This is from Tyler Sullivan, and he says DeShaun Watson. Think the answer to what we'll get out of Watson is somewhere in the middle of his performance last season, his peak in Houston, which isn't what the Browns are paying for. They're giving Watson the type of money that should result in a deep playoff run, toe-to-toe battles with AFC elite quarterbacks, and I'm not quite sure what we'll see in year 2. They had to give him the contract to get him to agree to come to Cleveland. They had to guarantee it. If you don't have an elite quarterback or a guy you feel is a franchise quarterback, you're always looking for it. Look at the team. Look at what the Jets did. The Jets took a guy number 2 overall, and they went out and got a guy that's going to be 40. It's just the way the NFL is. Mm-hmm. It is. Again, the salary cap is ever evolving. Like, again, DeShaun Watson's never going to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He never has been, never will be. Again, he's the 6th highest paid quarterback this year. So, and that's because even Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are making less money than he is because they got their deals 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when guys like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Aaron Rodgers got Russell Wilson's making more money than him. So it really is about getting the quarterback in the door, and you never know how it's gonna go from there. But again, what I will say is DeShaun Watson is 27 years old, as opposed to Russell Wilson in his 30s, Aaron Rodgers at 40. There's never been in NFL history a sign of an elite quarterback dropping off at 27. So I don't think there's reason to bet on that. I think
there's a good reason to bet on at least progression back to the mean. So will we see a top 5 quarterback again? I don't know, but we're definitely not going to see, I don't think, the DeShaun Watson we saw a year ago. So some progression back to the mean, even that gets you back into like the top 11, top 10 range. I think that's okay for what they're paying, because in a year or two, that's going to be where his contract is going to align anyway. Again, it's already at 6th. As in terms of average per year. So at 46 million, and you got to look at guys like Justin Herbert, guys like Joe Burrow, guys like Trevor Lawrence. Those guys are going to get paid, and they're going to get paid upwards of $55 million a year. So I think the money, they'd like to make a lot of a deal out of the guaranteed money, and I get it. He's the only quarterback ever to get a fully guaranteed contract, but in terms of per year, he's never going to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL.
No, and the other thing is, guys that are 27 that have the credentials that he has in the NFL don't become available very often. That's another reason that you had to pay the draft capital and the contract that you did to go get him. It just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Exactly. We'll see a lot more of it in the future too. And those quarterbacks don't come available very often, but when they do, you'll see it again in the future.
I agree with you. All right, so why should you be optimistic that DeShaun Watson gets better if you are a Browns fan? Kurt Warner with a breakdown of some of the things that Watson does well as it's a timing thing that he's missing on. This is from Kurt Warner's Quarterback Confidential, some of the things that he's doing well video-wise.
Just a little bit rusty on what to do on a particular play, where to read it. Timing is off a little bit. Sometimes it was the footwork, even though you see some really good things like this. Okay, I like this. They're just running what we call a semi-route. He gets an off corner. He's definitive. Knows what he wants to do. Stick that back foot in the ground. Hold on the back foot. I love it. Stick, hold, boom. Throw that ball out there. Great throw. Big time throw on the deep out. So you see the moments. You see the throws. Leads to a big play, 46-yard touchdown.
And again, Cory, that's some of the arm talent that you're talking about. That was a cross, far hash to the far sideline. So the arm talent is there. We saw yesterday, we showed a couple of clips. There was some timing where the ball was delivered a split second late, and it led to an incompletion. Those are factors of not playing for as long as he did, not being familiar with the offense, and not being familiar with his teammates. Those things have kind of gone away.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Again, we can talk about, well, he had all offseason. He had, he was here for the summer in training camp. But it's different from having a playbook in your hand and being able to practice in training camp, and then when you come back, versus actually getting on the field and communicating play-by-play with your offensive play caller, knowing what the offensive play caller feels comfortable calling for you in game situations, knowing how your offensive tackles are going to set around you, whether or not your offensive tackles are used to you being able to break contain, and knowing that is a possibility, because it wasn't for the other two quarterbacks that have played for Cleveland to that point. So it really does change. And, again, for Nick Chubb, running almost all out of gun once Watson came. And again, he's one of the more effective gun runners, but the technique changes for the offensive line in front of you when you're running out of gun as well. So there are just those little nuances that were flipped on its head 12 weeks into the season that won't be the case this year. Again, that sounds like an excuse. It could be, but that's all to say that there are no excuses this year. There's absolutely no excuses.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. It's time to go out and win. We mentioned the style of quarterback he is. Take a look at this. This is from Warren Sharp Football. Quarterbacks accounted for 21% of the rushing touchdowns last year. In 2010, it was only 11%. Quarterbacks accounted for 16% of all rushing yards last year, most in NFL history. And what Sharp Football is saying, game's changed. If your quarterback isn't mobile, he better be brilliant and extremely accurate from the pocket. Well, DeShaun Watson is mobile, as well as pretty darn accurate from the pocket during his time when he was playing regularly.
Yeah, again, it's hard to go back to 2020 and bank on season 3 years ago, but it's on film, and again, he's only 27, so by all accounts, he seems to be putting in the work on the field. By all accounts, that rust should be knocked off. We'll get a pretty early look. I don't even know if they're going to play him in the preseason, the first of the Hall of Fame game. I doubt how much he'll play in the preseason to begin with, but by all accounts, he should be back to where, at least near where he was in 2020, and if not, at least progression to the mean is what we want. But again, I don't think they're paying for a top 15, top 18 quarterback, a dime a dozen quarterback, and his skill set isn't a Kirk Cousins. His skill set isn't a Derek Carr. So by all accounts, they should have a quarterback they can count on to make plays for them offensively with his legs.
Yeah, and the other thing is they're starting training camp a week earlier, so I think those practices are even more important than that additional Hall. He doesn't have to play in the Hall of Fame game. The series or two that he would play, it's those practices that you get additional because of the extra one that are important to his development and the beginning of this season.
Yeah, and you're not splitting those reps with another quarterback. Last summer there was this pool like, yeah, we want to see DeShaun in this offense, but we also know he's not starting the first 11 games, so you have to get another guy those reps with the first team as well, and that's not the case this year. This year, if DeShaun Watson goes down, the season's down the drain. Like, that's just what it is. As much as we can say, well, Josh Dobbs started a couple games for the Titans last year, and he didn't look terrible, and he won a game, and that's great. You're not making the playoffs with Josh Dobbs. So there is no other universe, I would say, where another quarterback should even be getting first team snaps.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think that's what happened last year. You were forced to play the first 11 games with Jacoby Brissett, who wasn't brought in to be the starter. He was brought in to be the backup. Cory, Kinnan, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit about the running back position. Sports for CLE, you'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Cory Kinnan from BrownsWire.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey guys, Dan in Maryland. Wondered about a session you had with Mary Kay a couple of weeks ago where she was talking about what the Browns would potentially be looking for a third running back. And she described it as somebody who's got the size to get the tough yards inside, but can also help out in the passing game. And I was wondering if maybe you thought that this means John Kelly's going to get a good long look in training camp, and maybe he could leapfrog guys like Demetric Felton or even Hassan Hall. Kelly's got similar size profile as Dearness Johnson. His combine scores are very similar to Kareem Hunt's. So you can probably get, good production inside. But I also looked, in his third year at Tennessee in the passing game, he caught 37 balls, which is actually tied for the team lead. And all of his pre-draft scouting reports said he was a good pass blocker as well. So I was just wondering, now that he doesn't have Hunt and Johnson ahead of him, maybe he's going to get a chance this year that he maybe hasn't had in years past. Anyhow, keep up the good work. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Cory, he may get a little bit more of a chance, but I still think they like Jerome Ford. Come cut down day, 10 days before the start of the season, that might be when they find either a guy that's been around that if somebody gets hurt, you have to rely on.
Yeah, and he's done that a little bit for them. Back at the Denver game that Dearness broke out when both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt were hurt, the Thursday night game that Case Keenum started and they beat Denver. John Kelly got some carries in that game off of the practice squad, and I do think that the third running back is probably still not on the roster at this point. But I will say of the three guys that we're talking about, of Demetric Felton, of Hassan Hall, of John Kelly, I don't think there is a guy that's like, well, this is his role till it's not. I think it truly is up for grabs. They're not going to favor Dearness or Demetric. They're not going to favor Hassan Hall. They're not going to favor John Kelly. So I've liked what he's done in the preseason. But at the end of the day, I think we're talking about a dime a dozen back who, if he sees a hole, he can take it. But he doesn't have a lot of burst, a lot of explosiveness. But I think he can turn out some tough yards. But at the end of the day, again, we're talking about a running back 3. And if that's a conversation we have to have at this point in the summer, that means we've got a pretty good roster at the end of the day. But ultimately, I don't think that guy's on the roster.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, if the running back 3 is a guy that's there, and if it's like, oh, man, we lost this guy, and this guy can't go, we need him to step in, I don't know that you want to rely on somebody that hasn't done it consistently if you believe you are a playoff team like the Browns believe they are.
I know you've written an article about this, ranking all 32 starting running backs. Take me through that, and I tend to agree with you. Number one, Nick Chubb, and you had him ahead of Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry. I tend to agree.
So, again, Nick Chubb, even though he's never had last year was the highest volume he's ever had with 300 carries, a little over 300 carries. Highest volume he's ever had, but he's still not scraping the value or the volume that Derrick Henry, that Josh Jacobs is scratching. So I think if we really do put him in the category of touches, he's going to be a rushing title leader. I don't think he's ever going to get that opportunity to have that volume of touches. And I don't think as Browns fans, we should want our 29-year-old running back to have those volumes of carries either if you want to prolong his time in Cleveland and prolong his productivity. But as far as being light on his feet, his eyes are phenomenal. His contact balance is tremendous. Burst, explosiveness, long speed. I think he checks every single box. I think he'll get opportunities to catch the football more out of the backfield. I think on limited opportunities, he's shown he can. I think the hotter takes kind of come, but after one, I don't know if people would agree about Christian McCaffrey at 2, but based on his sample of his time in San Francisco with an offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan, who just knows how to scheme his weapons open. I mean, if you take his sample of what he did in San Francisco and expand that to a 17-game sample size, you're talking about 1,800 total yards, 18 touchdowns, a ton of catches. So I think McCaffrey's skill set is one of one, and then we get into the Derrick Henrys, the Aaron Jones, the Saquon Barkleys. So but again, I think Nick Chubb just checks every single box that you could hope for when you're talking about a running back.
I'm with you. And I think spreading things out like the Browns probably will, not playing as much too tight, I think that helps them. That's going to spread out the defense. It's going to take people out of the box. It could take linebackers off the field and put safeties onto the field. And, I like my chances with Nick Chubb against pretty much any safety.
Yeah, I agree. And again, the data's out there that shows that he's the most effective runner out of gun of anybody in the NFL right now. He's averaging 6 yards a carry from gun run. Again, the bigger issue is with the offensive line. But again, with the full offseason where, week 12, you're not throwing in a bunch of RPOs, you're not throwing in a bunch of gun run that you haven't been running 11 weeks prior. Now you have all summer. Now you have all training camp. Now you have all preseason to work on the minute differences between gun run and under center wide zone. And so I think with all of that into consideration, like Nick Chubb's in for a big year again because you have more weapons outside. Let's just call it what it is as well. The wide receiver room wasn't good outside of Amari Cooper last year. Again, you had Donovan Peoples-Jones who almost had 1,000 yards, but outside of that, it was decimated. So you go get Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Marquise Goodwin, who's going to play just a role, but that's a role that needed filled. So you have role players, you have top-end talent at wide receivers now. So I think the field's going to be wide open for Nick Chubb to have a little bit more room to dance.
I agree with you. And again, you've written an article about this, and I'm curious to your thoughts. 4 Browns who could be first-time Pro Bowlers in 2023. You list Elijah Moore, wide receiver, Greg Newsome, defensive back, tight end David Njoku, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. So take us through that article and kind of how you arrived at that.
Yeah, so I mean, I really do believe that Elijah Moore has the skill set of the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Again, Donovan Peoples-Jones is coming off a really productive year, but again, the separation data isn't there to say Donovan Peoples-Jones knows how to get open. He's a stiff route runner, very vertical. He's going to have to continue to thrive off of contested catches, which is a pretty volatile metric. Whereas you look at Elijah Moore, you look at his tape, you look at the metrics, and you say, this guy's always open. This guy's always open. But he was playing with the quarterback who couldn't get him the football. And I understand, Garrett Wilson could. That's great. But outside of one receiver, they couldn't find a way to spread the football around. I think they're going to have a better ability to do that this year. And I think Elijah Moore is in for not only a lot of targets naturally as a receiver, but they've been working on a lot of gadget stuff with him too. So I think they're going to manufacture ways to get the ball in his hands a lot. Again, I'm not going to project that he's going to go out and have a 1,000-yard season and score 10 touchdowns. But I think if you can get him to 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, and just find fun, creative ways to get him the ball, the trade's well worth it. I don't know if you're making a Pro Bowl at that point, but I do feel like that's kind of the baseline of the season we're looking at. And then on top of that, all it takes is 2-3 big games to say like, oh wow, this guy could be a Pro Bowler. Again, David Njoku was on pace for 1,000 yards last year before he got injured. He's lived up to the contract. his blocking profile over the past 3 years is one of the best of tight ends in the NFL. He's developed into a guy that's worth the contract. Again, if he can stay healthy, the Browns are going to get more explosive. And the biggest beneficiary of getting more explosive offensively should be your most explosive offensive talent, and that's David Njoku, national champion high jumper. He can jump out of the building. He's one of the more athletic tight ends in the league. So, again, his hands haven't really even been that big of an issue over the past couple of years as they were early in his career. So I think David Njoku, as long as he's healthy, again, the knee and then the ankle derailed him last year, but he was on pace for 1,000 yards. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, improved defensive tackle play, improved at defensive coordinator. That second level as a whole should benefit. They didn't go out and they didn't make any moves. So it says they trust Anthony Walker. They trust Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. They trust Sione Takitaki whenever he comes back. So he should have cleaner levels to work from as he's triggering downhill in the run game. He's always been pretty savvy in coverage to be able to cover tight ends down the field and rotate out and have a good feel for the middle of the field and coverage. So again, his size and durability is also a concern. So that depends a lot on his health as well. And then lastly, Greg Newsome. I just think people tend to write off how good Greg Newsome's rookie season was. Like it was tremendous for a rookie. He was up there with Patrick Surtain in conversations about these young cornerbacks are really good. Again, kicking into the nickel full time last year, and as he said, felt like he was playing linebacker, kind of leveled people's expectations for him. But now that they've kind of gone to this, they've already disclosed, Denzel Ward's going to be playing a lot more in the slot. He's going to be going in the slot. They're going to be matching a lot more, so he's not going to be playing exclusively. He's going to be playing outside a lot more. I think we could see him return to not only the form of his rookie season, but see a jump with Jim Schwartz's system as well, playing where his skill set is best utilized.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing I'd say about David Njoku, historically, DeShaun Watson, he does really well and throws to his tight ends a lot. So I think that's another thing that could factor into him having a big-time season. And he's been really good. I think he can get top 3, top 4, maybe top 5 tight ends in the NFL. I think he is that good. And I'm anxious to see him with DeShaun Watson. Cory Kinnan from BrownsWire.com and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at some projected win totals. Sports4CLE, be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Cory Kinnan from BrownsWire.com. NFL power rankings and projected win totals. This is from Sharp Football Analysis. So they have the Chiefs number 1, 11.5. Eagles 2, 11.5. Bills were 3 at 10.5. They have the Browns 14 at 9.5. Certainly an argument for the Browns to be higher on this list. They addressed the defensive front 7 this offseason and have quietly built a talented group on offense. They have the roster to win if Watson can return to form following a full offseason. And, Cory, there we go again. All comes back to can DeShaun Watson. And we've kind of gone through a lot of what was troubling him was not releasing it quick, not making decisions as quickly as you would like. In Houston, he processed things much quicker. So you would expect full season in an offense, more familiarity with teammates, not, still entering what should be the prime. You would expect him to come back towards, as we've been saying, the mean, and not going at the top where he was in 2020, but, a whole lot closer to that than he was last year.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about it a lot on the show already about having to flip an offense on their head 12 weeks into the season, but that even comes down to pre-snap responsibility in Houston. He was responsible for calling protections. He was allowed to. He had the liberty to audible, all these things. But when you are entering an offense 12 weeks into the season, those are things that he didn't have last year. As him and Stefanski were still getting their bearings with one another. That's not going to be the case again this year. So again, comfortability, but also control. He should have much more control of the offense this season, and I think that will benefit him greatly. And again, there's 7 playoff spots per conference. There's 14 playoff spots. Like, all you need to do is be 7th in the AFC, and you have that lottery ticket. And again, we're talking about just getting that lottery ticket because the parity once you get into the playoffs is so razor thin. Again, you don't want to be 7. You don't want to be in that bottom seed, but as long as you get in, you punch that lottery ticket, and anything can happen. So again, progress back to the mean. Hopefully a little bit more. Hopefully we get back to where we were. But I would say control of the offense is key. But again, all on Watson.
Yeah, and I would imagine Kevin Stefanski gives him a whole lot more freedom than he did either Jacoby Brissett or Baker Mayfield, because this is a guy he wanted. If you think about it, he's one of the guys that wanted DeShaun Watson as his quarterback.
Yeah, it's very well documented that him and Barry were the two that were the conductors of the train to make that deal happen. So now they're here together, and again, it was Watson's choice to come to Cleveland too. You can say it's the money, and that's probably part of it. That's probably a big part of it. But at the end of the day, he's not going to go somewhere where he doesn't think he has a chance to be successful. I mean, I've heard him say that. In a spaces with his quarterback coach, that he thinks Stefanski is one of the brighter play calling guys in the league, and I would say there's data to back that up as well about win probability added based on 4th down decisions, 3rd down decisions. So I think they're right where they need to be. I believe in this regime, I really do. But again, I think we're at a point where if they don't win this year, then there's not going to be much to believe in with this regime, because I don't know if they'll be around anymore. But top 7 in the AFC, that's all you need.
All right, this again from Sharp Football. NFL head coaching rankings for the 2023 season. Andy Reid 1, John Harbaugh 2, Sean McDermott 3. They rank Kevin Stefanski 19 behind Campbell and Daboll. Kevin Stefanski finished in the bottom half of everyone's rankings after finishing 11th in 2022, overseeing a team that's gone from 11 wins and a playoff spot to 10 losses in just a 2-year span. That's all fair. That's what has happened. You look at it, and it comes back to the quarterback play. You know, Baker Mayfield was hurt early, torn labrum, probably shouldn't have played if you go back and you look at it. And then Jacoby Brissett, you know, a backup quarterback for the first 11 games. Having said that, you got to win.
Yeah, I agree. I think those head coach rankings are so hard to quantify. How do you quantify a good head coach other than just using wins and losses? And if you're just using wins and losses, it's really minimizing what else goes on in terms of constructing a game plan, being able to maintain a locker room, having a team that's prepared every week. So I really think that a lot of those head coaching rankings are just really a lot of recency bias based on record, whether fair or not. So, I mean, in 2020, he was probably a top 10 head coach in those rankings. 2021, he was probably still top 12. 2022, you know, we're sitting at 19. But I would say if he goes back out and he makes the playoffs again, wins a playoff game, we're going to be talking about a top 10 head coach again. But that's just the nature of the beast. And it's the offseason. It's that 6 weeks dead period where there's no football, no mini camp until training camp. So that's when all those ranking pieces really start to pop up. And I'm writing them, so I get it. You need content, but it's really where all that stuff starts to pop up. But it is largely based on recency bias of wins and losses.
Agree with you. All right. I know you've written an article about some of the roster guys that are on the bubble at different positions. What are some of the training camp battles that you're kind of keeping an eye out for as far as those roster bubbles go?
Yeah, for once it feels good to talk about roster bubbles being depth positions. Like I don't think there's a single starting job that's like up for grabs this summer. I really don't. I think your depth chart's pretty set at the top with the ones. So we're really talking about depth pieces. So I look at like the fourth safety. Who's the fourth safety behind Thornhill, Delpit, McLeod, and that's where we talk about D'Anthony Bell, who is the incumbent, the undrafted free agent from a year ago, who's turned into a pretty good special teamer. Saw some reps down the stretch when Ronnie Harrison was hurt or when he was bad, and they played him instead. But now you have Ronnie Hickman coming in from Ohio State, also undrafted this year. So I think that's a battle to watch. Who's that fourth safety in the room? But I would say even Bell probably still has the advantage there just based off of his profile on special teams. Again, running back three, we've talked a lot about that, and that guy's probably not even on the roster right now. But if it is, between Hassan Hall, John Kelly, Demetric Felton, and then I would say an interesting one outside of defensive tackle. That's another one too. Who's that last defensive tackle in the room? I think they roster 5. And I think, they have Tomlinson, they have Ika, they have Jordan Elliott now that he restructured his deal and pretty much guaranteed his deal this year. I think he's pretty safe. But I think you have three guys battling for two spots in that defensive tackle rotation with Perrion Winfrey, Tristan Hill, Maurice Hurst. Again, Tristan Hill, Maurice Hurst brought in very little guaranteed money. So I don't think they're locks to make the roster, but I think they were brought in to churn competition at the bottom of the roster. So two of the three of those guys, I think, are fighting out for two defensive tackle rooms. And then I think I'm really interested to see who will be that Sam linebacker while Sione Takitaki is still probably starting the year on the physically unable to perform list. So while he's on the PUP list, who's starting at Sam linebacker, I think is a really that could be your starting battle that you're watching. Right now, I think it's probably Tony Fields. Tony Fields played it last year when Takitaki kicked inside and they were really dealing with some injuries. And I thought Tony Fields looked playable. Like, he looked good. He had that breakout game against the Texans, but otherwise I never saw like, oh, that's a significant lapse by Tony Fields. Again, he's not super traitsy. He's not super explosive. He's not a guy that's going to wow you with athleticism, but I think he does his job, and I think he did his job last year when he was asked to. So I think he probably has the advantage, but that's something I'll be watching. I know Jordan Kunasik has some fans with Jim Schwartz has already praised Jordan Kunasik. So who will be that Sam linebacker while Sione Takitaki continues to recover?
And the good thing is we don't have to wait too much longer. A week from Saturday, training camp gets underway in West Virginia, so it'll get rolling here pretty quickly. Cory Kinnan, brownswire.com, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Cory.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Appreciate it.
All right, Cory Kinnan, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff, brownswire.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus joins us. Sports for CLE. He'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's take a look at this. So this is from Pro Football Focus. Brad Spielberger wrote this. Taking a look at the salary cap from 23 to 25. So 2023, 2025. Browns are already over the cap by $28.5 million. That's the most over the cap in the NFL. Prorated money, almost $335,000. That's 29th. Free agent valuation for 2024, 106, almost 106 and a half, 10th in the NFL. Let's welcome in Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus. So, Brad, the Browns are under the cap this year. We've talked about it. They've kind of pushed it out, pushed it back. How concerned should Browns fans be about where they sit relative to the cap for upcoming seasons?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're going to be the highest spending team in the NFL 3 years in a row, which is how they're currently set up to spend the most cash in the NFL this year and the next two, you obviously have to start manipulating the salary cap and doing different things. So we know they're going to restructure DeShaun Watson probably again, maybe restructure Myles Garrett after those option bonuses in his deal have run out, Denzel Ward, etc., all those big contract players. They're just going to keep kicking that can down the road. Concern maybe isn't the right word. I think Browns fans probably remember the days of having a ton of cap space and it meaning not much of anything. But I think they should understand, like, this nucleus, this roster is probably it. Yeah, they're going to add depth and they'll add pieces, like they did this offseason. But I don't think you're going to see these massive marquee splash type moves the next couple of years.
Are they going to have to make tough decisions relative to getting rid of some of the veterans, do you think, in the next year or two? You keep hearing Amari Cooper's name. He has like a $24 million. Are those the type of decisions that are coming next year, or can they push those off a couple of years still, do you think?
It'll be a case-by-case basis. Obviously, a guy like John Johnson gets cut this year. I think Zadarius Smith, they reduce his contract down to 1 season, and I'm guessing it's a bit of a mercenary type deal. And, barring unforeseen circumstances, he probably is just going to be there, see if they can make a big push in 1 season, and then they'll let him go sign elsewhere. So the bigger moves like an Amari Cooper, it really probably depends on his play. The Dallas Cowboys obviously traded him away because they felt his production wasn't in line with his compensation. We'll get there with Cleveland, but I think honestly, if he plays well, they don't need to make that move.
All right, very good. All right, let's take a look. NFL offseason report for all 32 teams, again, from Pro Football Focus. So free agency recap for the Browns. Browns made it a point to improve interior defensive line, starting with the addition of Dalvin Tomlinson. Best move of the offseason, in addition to defensive line-focused moves in the draft and free agency, the team also traded 2 future late-round picks to Minnesota for Zadarius Smith, who racked up 84 total pressures last year for the Vikings. How good were those moves relative to the needs of what the Browns had in the offseason?
I'm not sure many teams match their needs with what they did better than the Cleveland Browns, especially when you take into account the resources available. I mean, we just talked about they needed to improve the defensive line, and they went crazy there with 3 big moves to address the situation. And then I think we talked probably a bunch about those tertiary weapons, those secondary complementary weapons in the receiving game. And they obviously go out and add Elijah Moore, make some draft picks to that effect as well. So I really do think you don't always want to just go after need. I think you can get yourself into trouble sometimes. But I think the way they were structured coming into this offseason, it really was, there are a couple of glaring holes. And fortunately, the rest of the roster is in a good spot, both from a starter standpoint and with some solid depth. So we can really focus like all of our resources on a couple specific spots. And I think they did just that.
Same article from Pro Football Focus, outlook for 2023. And they say, similar to the Ravens, the Browns have pieces on both sides of the ball to make a championship run as long as their quarterback returns to form. A little bit earlier in the show, we showed, and yesterday as well, we showed Kurt Warner kind of breaking down DeShaun Watson. Some of the trouble with Watson late on delivering the ball to his receivers, those are kind of things you would expect. New system, new teammates, haven't played in 700 days. Fair to say that?
Definitely fair to say that. The rust is only going to exacerbate that issue. I do think that is a little bit, DeShaun Watson historically as well. He likes to, wait till a guy comes open as opposed to always throwing players open. He's willing to, turn down a good throw to wait for a great one, which of course sometimes is phenomenal. It turns into highlight plays, explosive plays, and touchdowns. But I do think the marriage between him and Kevin Stefanski will come down to, can Stefanski also convince him, hey, don't wait for Amari Cooper to get open on a double move if David Njoku's open for 10 yards or Elijah Moore is open for 7. Like, making those concessions and taking what the defense gives you, I do think still is the biggest area for growth outside of just shaking off that rust that is understandable.
The other thing that we've talked about, you look at Russell Wilson, that's a guy that's 30-some years old. Aaron Rodgers, 38, 39, 40 years old. DeShaun Watson's 27. He'll be 28 during the season. It's not very often that a guy that age who has been to that many Pro Bowls, 3, becomes available, is it?
No, it's a one-of-one situation, a one-of-one circumstance that, who knows if we see it again for a very long period of time. So, yeah, that's the thing is there's not really a rush. I mean, there is in the sense that they do have a handful of, I guess, guys that may not be there for the long haul. But realistically, you look at the pillars and, cornerstones of this franchise right now. Denzel Ward's not going anywhere. Myles Garrett's not going anywhere. Obviously, Watson is not either. The offensive line, yeah, a couple guys, the guards, going to be getting up there in age a little bit, but they're not exactly, ancient by any means. It really is. There can be patience. I think, the lack of patience this year is simply we just want to see the investment lead to the results and just see a competitive football team because on paper, the roster, I think, stacks up against anybody.
I agree with you. You also wrote an article, one last move for all of the 32 teams before training camp. For the Browns, you say sign Myles Jack. Just 28 for the duration of the 2023 season. Missed tackle rate below 10%. That's been a problem. In 3 straight seasons, 76 defensive snaps against the run, 12th among off-ball linebackers. How good of a fit do you think he is, and why did both the Jaguars and Steelers move on from it? That's the only thing that concerns me about Myles Jack. 2 really good programs kind of moved on from him.
No, I think at this point he maybe isn't an every down player and isn't a starter. And so obviously Jacksonville, he was on one of the biggest contracts in the NFL at the position, and it just got to a point where they felt he wasn't worth it anymore. He got a strong offer, 2 years, $16 million from Pittsburgh, and again was going to make about $9 or $10 million this year. And Pittsburgh, the cost-benefit analysis simply was not there. But I think because of the injury to Anthony Walker, what sounded like a serious injury, maybe early on, you do get some Myles Jack playing significant time. But realistically going forward, only in base defense, you get him out there, particularly as put that in there, against the run. He's not the coverage player he was when he was younger, but he does fill a role. I know there's been, the Deion Joneses and other fillers they've tried to add, but if it doesn't work, yeah, that's why you're spending near minimum amount of money or making a very small trade to do it. Those moves aren't always supposed to work, but there's no reason not to continue to churn a little bit at the bottom of the roster, spend not a lot of resources to just have some decent depth and a player that does have a history of playing well and maybe a higher floor than an internal player right now.
That makes sense. Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about defense. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns with Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus. This from the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, talking about the Browns' potential for 2023.
If injuries do not take their toll on this football team, I think that is, for me, where I think Cleveland has the most opportunity to really make an impact. And I didn't even mention another quality starter that they added in Juan Thornhill. Mm-hmm. So you have Zadarius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Juan Thornhill as quality starter plus additions to that defense, which was bad last year, right? Let's be honest. I think they have the talent that they need to bounce back.
Yeah, I really like the shout out here for Cleveland as one of the good surprises. And they didn't even get much of a bump at all for DeShaun Watson, right? His ranking within the quarterbacks wasn't a major asset to this overall equation. And what should be exciting for Cleveland fans is that there's obviously plenty of room for him to find himself and play good football because he is supported well. Mm-hmm. He does have what it takes to go out there and be successful. And for him, I'm guessing behind him, everything's moving forward and settling in and having a regular offseason. That's all going to be really beneficial for him finding his game again and, making some noise here with the Cleveland Browns. So I think a couple of really good shout outs here in the New Orleans Saints and Cleveland Browns as surprises in a good way.
And Brad, they ranked the Browns 9th overall roster. They also said the injury thing you'd say about all the teams. There is not a team that is deep enough to survive the type of injuries that the Browns had at their linebacking core a season ago. When you look at this roster, how key is that defense, and how big of an addition do you think Jim Schwartz is?
A massive addition, and I think in part because you're going to see him usually have 5 rushers, be rotating players, and part of the idea there is keeping guys fresh and maybe avoiding some injuries by having a platoon-style defensive line. And of course, if you have 5 rushers, you're only going to have 6 players behind them. That takes somebody off the field, at times as well, and that can further keep guys fresh. But I will say, of course, the injury, excuse, whatever you want to call it, it does apply to every team. I think that's a big part of this thing as well, as they mentioned the top level additions. That's also why a guy like me gets excited about the Ogbo Okoronkwo and other moves, because if Za'Darius Smith gets hurt, you're not dropping down to Isaiah McGuire or insert replacement level player here. You're dropping down to a really good football player as well, and I think that was key to their offseason in addition to the splashier moves.
Yeah, I agree with you. Rodney McLeod comes to mind as well along those lines, in addition to Juan Thornhill. So the Browns getting ready, releasing some hype videos. Denzel Ward, a guy that is due for a big year.
The ball is intercepted. Denzel Ward's got it. He's got it at the 45 of Atlanta. He cut right in the lap of the defender, and Denzel Ward's got the pick. They're at the 5. They're going to lateral it back again. It's going to be recovered in the end zone for a touchdown. Recovered by Denzel Ward. He's going to quarterback sneak it, and he just dives over the pile. A loose ball is picked up by Denzel Ward. Touchdown. And the crazy game in Houston rolls along.
Denzel Ward has 2 touchdowns with 3 rushing yards on the season.
Brad, I think my favorite part of that is Greg Newsome talking into the microphone that he's wearing on his shoulder. Tell me your thoughts. I think Jim Schwartz's defense may help Denzel Ward as much as anybody, just because what he's going to ask him to do plays into his strengths.
I think it's a fair assessment, no question. I think he just simplifies things. I know there was the quote from Ward talking about how they'll be thinking less, probably less pattern matching, and more just, here's your assignment, here's what I'm asking you to do on this given snap, go ahead and do it. And I think it will benefit him. I think he'll move him around a little bit, probably play him more in the slot or be following a number 1 receiver. And I do think that at the end of the day is Denzel Ward's skill set. He can play up and press man and just go head to head and try to erase a team's number 1 option. Obviously, he'll have other responsibilities, but if he gets asked to do more of that and less of some other things, I think he'd appreciate that opportunity, and I think it would make a lot of sense in this Jim Schwartz system.
Yeah, I agree. Guys that have elite skill sets want to play to them and want to be challenged, and Jim Schwartz can do that. This from Dog Pound Daily. 3 false narratives about the Browns in 2023. Number 3, there are no holes on this roster. You'd say that about any team in the NFL. Number 2, Jim Schwartz fixes the defense. Injury and leadership were 2 big issues last year. And number 1, DeShaun Watson is guaranteed to thrive in 2023. All those are fair points, but I think Jim Schwartz and the Browns have brought in guys that will assume leadership roles just by the nature of their personality. I think it's almost an unstated thing. The guys that went out and signed filled roles and needs, but are leader-type guys.
And I think Dalvin Tomlinson, no question about it. You hear a lot of good things coming out of Minnesota, and obviously before then in New York, you've heard that about him for a long period of time. I know both teams really did not want to lose him, and he maybe got a strong deal in part because teams understand that comes with it. And then for Juan Thornhill, I mean, he has the championship pedigree. He's made an AFC championship game in every season of his career thus far. So, he can tell the guys what it's like, how to adjust to those environments and those different things. And of course, Zadarius Smith has been a championship caliber player as well. So I agree. Look, it's not a magic fix. There's no question about that. But they didn't just bring in talented football players. I think they also made a concerted effort to bring in, guys that are all about ball and guys that are not going to think about things beyond winning football games, which may have been prevalent a bit last year.
The other thing is Jim Schwartz gives them an identity. The identity is they're going to be aggressive. They're going to go after the quarterback. And again, I'm not trying to take a shot at anybody that was the defensive coordinator before in Joe Woods. That defense didn't have an identity. It just didn't.
It just didn't, and I think there were miscommunications and just guys that were not comfortable with they're being asked to do on a given basis, and it was weird because you would see stretches where they played very good football, and then things would kind of fall apart in a hurry, and you started to wonder, was there some scouting going on by other teams? Were they noticing tendencies or noticing ways to different route patterns or different things that kind of bend the rules and kind of mess with what the Browns relied upon? Because there were sometimes just spurts of just bad stretches of performance, and you have to think some of that goes back to were there deficiencies in the scheme maybe they didn't recognize quickly enough.
All right, before we go to break, you wrote an article, 3 players to build around for each AFC team. Browns, you have Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and Amari Cooper. That's pretty good. You got your edge rusher, a shutdown corner, and a wide receiver, and I think Amari Cooper's really underrated. I mean, to do what he did with a core muscle injury for the end part of the season when DeShaun Watson was there, I'm anxious to see him healthy.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, look, I did write in there. Obviously, DeShaun Watson is being built around more than any player has ever been built around in the history of the league, given his fully guaranteed deal. But I think Cooper is borderline becoming an underrated player. For his size, to have the speed combination, the separation ability, he's one of the best route runners in the entire NFL still. Yeah, I think for whatever reason, he just kind of goes under the radar a little bit, even though he just puts up 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown plus seasons, year after year.
And he does it. He's almost like the Nick Chubb of wide receivers. It's very understated. I just want to win.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Brad Spielberger and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Plus an interesting stat about the Browns relative to one-score games. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I got a little of a strange question, or maybe it's not a strange question, but do you think that the NFL will put the Super Bowl on pay-per-view one day? I don't ever want to pay for it myself, but just wondering if that's legal or absurd to even ask that question. Forgive my ignorance on the matter. I just want to know your thoughts. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Brad, I'm curious to your thoughts on that. I mean, it costs, $1 million something per 30-second spot. Do you think it ever goes to a pay-per-view situation?
A phenomenal and fascinating question. I don't think so, but, the NFL is not shy of finding new revenue streams and new ways to, bring in as much money as humanly possible, but I certainly hope not.
Yeah, I would. You want it as available as it is. It's become the biggest, sporting event in the world, and I would think if you put it on pay-per-view, it takes some of that away from it. However, as you said, it's interesting. It's an interesting question, without a doubt. All right.
In 2022, the Browns had a winning record in games decided by more than one score. They were 5-4 in games that were more than 8 points. They were 2-6 in one-score games. Only the Bears at 1-7 were worse. That's from Football Outsiders' Aaron Schatz. I guess what that goes to show you is there's, little things add up and mean a lot. There's instances, and the Jets game comes to mind. There were probably a couple others, but you got to win close games if you're going to be a playoff team.
And that's actually a good sign in terms of positive regression potential for this year. You look year to year how teams perform in one-score games, and if they have an outlier result in a prior season, doesn't matter if they were a bad team, a good team, whatever, in either year, generally that is not consistent, and there's a regression. So they will, of course, need to perform better or to execute in those, tight moments. But historically, a team that goes 2-6 in one-score games should have that flip the following season, which is another good indicator for this Cleveland Browns team.
And think back to the year the Browns made the playoffs a couple years ago. They were very good in the one-score games, to your point. This is also kind of interesting. Top 5 AFC North cornerbacks ranked in 2023. This is by Dog Pound Daily. So number 5, they go Mike Hilton from the Bengals. Number 4, Greg Newsome from the Browns. Number 3, Marlon Humphrey from the Ravens. Number 2, Chidobe Awuzie from the Bengals. And number 1, Denzel Ward from the Browns. So they have the Browns with the 1st and 5th cornerbacks in the AFC North. And, the other thing is their 3rd cornerback, Martin Emerson's pretty good as well. So cornerback is a strength. What are your thoughts just about their cornerbacks?
Yeah, I was going to say, Martin Emerson deserves a shout as well. Played very well for them last year. I think probably will get most of the slot reps, but I know Newsome and Ward spent some time there, could spend some more time depending on the matchup. I'm sure if opposing teams put a big body receiver on the inside, we'll see some of Ward and Newsome in there. So, it's a strength of this team. There are good young players as well that could potentially only get better and could fit with, you mentioned Rodney McLeod and Juan Thornhill and Delpit and some of the players in the back end that always, of course, provide further assurances for young corners. So, yeah, it's a great unit. It is probably the strength or one of the strengths of this football team at this point. And I just noticed there's no Steelers on that list. Was the thing that caught my eye.
Yeah, and again, the corners for the Steelers, they went out and got Patrick Peterson. So, again, a guy that's on the other side of 30, probably down a little bit. They do have Minkah Fitzpatrick, which, that's kind of an equalizer back there. What about Newsome? Newsome's a guy that, again, much like Ward, I think people are overlooking how good he was as a rookie. I mean, you didn't hear his name, and that's usually a sign people aren't throwing his way.
100%. Yeah, no, maybe last year was not as good as his rookie season, but he looked like the guy coming out of Northwestern, a guy that is physical, can play up at the catch point, can really bother a receiver during his route or when he's trying to break off his route. Like, he's just not going to let you get comfortable and continue to create separation against him or make contested catches against him. I really do, again, think it all comes down to just getting more comfortable, being more confident in what you're doing, and that will go a long way in getting all these guys back on track. But, yeah, the talent for Newsome is obvious.
Who on the defensive side of the ball are you most anxious to see what Jim Schwartz does with and how he utilizes?
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see what he does with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. We saw in Tennessee guys like David Long would get a lot of pass rush reps or do different things or, just be downhill, be fast, be physical, and be triggering very early. And I think we're going to see some creative and cool ways to use Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, whether it's in coverage or doing things like that and playing forward. But I think he's going to be a jackknife and be asked to do a million different things, in a responsible manner. But I think it's going to be interesting and fun to see what he does.
We've also heard Schwartz talk about the 5 down, playing 5 down linemen. How creative do you think you can get when you look at the pieces that the Browns have on that defensive? He's got a lot of options on that defensive line.
100%. I think it could be cool if you explore with maybe having Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett either over the tackles or between the tackles. Let's say you have Dalvin Tomlinson over the center, those two guys between the tackles, and then you have Okoronkwo and McGuire or a linebacker or a DB that comes down, nickel blitz, whatever, that are playing on true wide nine on the edge. I mean, you can just wreak havoc and just have no confidence for the opposing offensive line of, are they going to stunt? Where a guy's going to come from? What are they trying to accomplish on this play? You can mix and match so much. It's going to be a lot of fun.
The other thing before I let you go, Jim Schwartz is a guy that will do it specific to, it will be game plan specific to the opponent, correct?
Yes, you would imagine so. That's kind of been the historic, Jim Schwartz approach.
Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus, as always. Great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Brad.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Brad Spielberger, always really good stuff. Pro Football Focus. Make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff with the Browns. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.